Chapter 1. After a car crash, Lillian Hayes lost her memory. She remembered everyone except for Ethan Crawford. Her best friend, Nina Crawford, who had been by her side for days, realized she truly didn't recognize the name. Nina's expression changed dramatically. "Lily, it's just the two of us here now. Tell me, is this some new hard-to-get tactic you've come up with? Are you trying to get my brother's attention again?" Lillian was completely bewildered, her eyes wide with surprise. "No, it's not that. I really don't remember. Who is he?" "You're not lying to me?" Then swear on it. Faced with suspicion, Lillian didn't hesitate and immediately made a solemn vow. Seeing her dare to make such an oath, Nina looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. She grabbed Lillian's shoulders and shook them. "You really lost your memory, and you only forgot my brother?" Lillian couldn't understand what was so shocking about it and pressed on. "Who on earth is Ethan Crawford?" Nina's face grew complicated. She looked at her friend with a headache coming on and began to explain, bit by bit. "Ethan is my brother. You came over to my house once, years ago, and it was love at first sight for you. You chased after him for 7 whole years." As Nina rambled on, Lillian's mind was a complete blank. "So, is he my boyfriend now?" A flicker of embarrassment crossed Nina's face. "No, my brother was always cold to you. He was in love with someone else, so he rejected you and everyone else who pursued him. His heart only has room for his first love, Ivy Gardner. When they broke up, he was so devastated he drank himself into the hospital and nearly died. He's never gotten over her all these years. In fact, the reason you were in that accident was because he was on his way to pick up Ivy, who had just returned to the country. He abandoned you on the highway in a downpour, and that's how you got into the car crash and lost your memory." Those few sentences left Lillian stunned into silence, her expression a mess of confusion. "If what you're saying is true, that your brother was so cold to me, was in love with someone else, and even hurt me for her, then what exactly did I like about him? Are you sure you're not making this up? How could I lie to you? Everyone knows you were crazy in love with my brother." Nina shook her head and quickly handed Lillian her phone. "Here, open it." Lillian took it, half believing, and expertly typed in a sequence of numbers, but the phone didn't unlock. "Your passcode isn't your favorite celebrity anymore. It's my brother's birthday. 7:15, Lillian typed in the numbers Nina gave her, and the phone unlocked. She opened the photo gallery, and her vision was flooded with thousands of pictures of a man she didn't know. She stared at his devastatingly handsome face for a long time before realizing that everything Nina said must be true. Because Ethan Crawford's looks were exactly her type. But in all these photos, clearly taken from various hidden angles, every glance he directed her way was utterly devoid of warmth. As she scrolled, a heavy feeling settled in Lillian's chest. She then opened the Notes app. It was filled with meticulously recorded details about Ethan Crawford. His likes and dislikes, his tastes, his taboos. Besides that, there was a diary, updated daily, chronicling a love that was never returned. The 7th Valentine's Day. I spent 2 weeks rehearsing my confession countless times. Unsurprisingly, I was rejected again. Ethan Crawford, you said we could never be, but I still can't let you go. You got drunk again tonight. You mistook me for her and called her name hundreds of times. You said you couldn't forget her, that even knowing there was no response, you were still a moth drawn to a flame, willing to wait. In that moment, I felt we were the same. Our love is equally pitiful, equally tragic. Even without her memories, the pain and despair saturating every word resonated deep within Lillian. Her heart felt like it had been pricked, sending out waves of incessant pain. A sour, heavy feeling rose in her nose, and she felt the sting of unshed tears. She stood there, stunned, unable to calm herself for a long time. After a long silence in the hospital room, Nina finally spoke. "So, what are you going to do now? Do you want to continue treatment? My uncle is a brilliant psychiatrist, but he's overseas right now. If you want, let's not. Even though I don't remember, I can feel that I must have been in a lot of pain when I loved your brother. Now that I've forgot, maybe it's a good thing." Lillian took a deep breath, then looked down at her phone and methodically deleted every single photo and every note. Nina watched her, her face a mask of shock. Just as she was about to say something, her phone rang. After hanging up, she grabbed her bag, left a quick word, and rushed out. "I have to go home for something. Lily, you get some rest. I'll come back to see you when I'm done." The door clicked shut. Just as Lillian was about to rest, a call came from her family home. "Lily, darling, do you remember me mentioning that you had a childhood engagement arranged for you? It's been postponed for years now. Have you given it any thought?" Mrs. Hayes was fully prepared for her to refuse. This call was just a last-ditch effort, but Lillian was silent for a few seconds before giving an unexpectedly agreeable answer. "Okay, Mom. Once I've handled things here, I'll come home and honor the engagement." Her mother on the other end was floored, her voice filled with astonishment. What did you say? You don't like your best friend's brother anymore? You insisted on staying in Capital City for him, chasing after him for so many years. Why the sudden change of heart? Lillian didn't know how to explain the amnesia and didn't want to worry her family about the car accident, so, after some thought, she gave a vague reply. "I don't like him anymore. And I never will again." Chapter 2. After the call, Lillian roughly estimated how long it would take to wrap things up and bought a plane ticket back to her hometown of Bayview for 2 weeks later. Just after she bought the ticket, a nurse came to call her for a follow-up checkup. She got into her wheelchair, but she never expected that the moment she left her room and looked up, she would see a very familiar face. She had just seen it in her photo gallery. Ethan Crawford the instant he saw her, the coldness in his eyes intensified, freezing over. "How did you know I was here? Are you following me even to the hospital?" Lillian hadn't anticipated that her first meeting with Ethan after losing her memory would be like this, and that he would be so disgusted by her. She froze for a moment before recovering. "You're mistaken. I wasn't following you. I was in a car accident on the highway, so I'm recovering here." Ethan frowned, his gaze sweeping over her. Just as he was about to speak, the person from his room walked out. He immediately went to her side. "Ivy, you just broke your fever. Didn't I tell you to rest? Why are you out here?" Hearing the name, Lillian instinctively turned and saw Ivy Gardner, dressed in a long white dress, her hair cascading down to her waist. The moment their eyes met, Ivy offered a faint smile and looked at Ethan with some surprise. "It was stuffy in the room, so I came out for some air." "Ethan, who is this?" Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "My sister's best friend, Lillian Hayes. She's a designer in the company's design department. We're not close." At his words, the corners of Ivy's lips lifted in a gentle smile. "Miss Hayes, a pleasure to meet you. I'm Ivy Gardner. Your head is all bandaged up. Did you have an accident?" Lillian nodded. "Yes, a car accident. A minor concussion, which caused some memo." Before she could finish, a nurse called out from behind her. "Patient in room 1124, Lillian Hayes, it's time for your checkup." Hearing this, Lillian had no desire to make small talk with people she no longer remembered. After a brief farewell, she quickly wheeled herself away for her examination. Left behind, Ethan watched her uncharacteristically indifferent reaction. He frowned, giving her a rare second glance. Didn't she always cling to him relentlessly whenever she saw him? Why did she leave so easily this time? After a few routine checkups, Lillian went to the pharmacy to pick up her medication. Passing by the garden downstairs, she saw the fine weather and decided to get some sun, so she went for a stroll by herself. Just as she reached the edge of a large fountain, Ivy Gardner approached and called out to her. "Miss Hayes, you're out for some air too. What a coincidence." Lillian was also surprised to run into her again and politely exchanged a few pleasantries. Ivy was very forward. Within moments, she was pushing Lillian's wheelchair, her voice bright and cheerful. "Ethan just took a call and had to step away. I was getting a bit bored by myself. How about we chat for a bit? Since you're Nina's friend and you've worked with Ethan for so many years, there's something I wanted to ask you. I heard back when I was abroad that some girl had been chasing Ethan for 7 years, relentlessly. Do you know who that girl is? And what was Ethan's attitude toward her?" Lillian stiffened for a moment, but quickly regained her composure, her voice calm. "I have no idea. But for someone to chase him for 7 years while his heart remained set on you, it just goes to show that you're the most important person to him. No one else matters." Chapter 3. Hearing her speak with such conviction, a trace of surprise appeared in Ivy's eyes, her tone turning shy. "You know about Ethan and me? Does he mention me often?" Lillian remembered what Nina had said about how much he loved Ivy and nodded slightly. "Yes." Ivy's face grew redder, her eyes shining with joy. "Ethan was a year ahead of me in college, the campus golden boy, a true genius. He had countless admirers, but he fell for me at first sight. He pursued me for a long time before I agreed to give him a chance. After we got together, he doted on me completely. He'd attend classes with me, go to the library, fill the campus with roses to celebrate our anniversaries, and get jealous for ages if another guy confessed to me. We were together for 4 years. Everyone said I was the love of his life. He told me countless times that he would marry me after graduation. But I didn't want to be a housewife. I had my own dreams to achieve. So I turned down his proposal, broke up with him, and went abroad to study. But I knew all these years that he never let me go, which is why I decided to come back. When my plane landed in Capital City, I was actually a little nervous. But the moment I saw him rushing through the pouring rain at the airport to grab my luggage, I knew that nothing had changed. I've been under the weather the last few days, and he's been taking care of me constantly. I can feel that he wants to get back together, but for some reason, he hasn't brought it up. I thought maybe he'd developed feelings for that other girl, so I wanted to ask you about it. Lillian listened quietly to these old stories, her heart completely still. She even managed a small smile. I think if he cares about you that much, he wouldn't bring up getting back together so casually. He's probably planning a surprise. Her words put Ivy at ease. Ivy waved her hand to say goodbye, but in doing so, she accidentally dropped her phone into the fountain. She instinctively bent down to retrieve it, but lost her balance and tumbled headfirst into the water. Seeing her fall in, Lillian froze for a second, then immediately started to turn her wheelchair to go get help. But as soon as she turned, she saw Ethan sprinting toward them. He jumped into the water without a second thought and pulled Ivy out. Ivy coughed up several mouthfuls of water, her breathing gradually returning to normal. Only then did the frantic worry on his face begin to subside. Lillian took in his entire reaction. She was about to go call a doctor when he stopped her with a harsh shout. "Did you push Ivy into the water on purpose? Instead of trying to help, you were just going to pretend nothing happened and sneak away?" Lillian was stunned by his accusation. She fell in trying to get her phone. "I didn't push her and I wasn't going to leave her there." Ethan shot her a cold glare, cutting her off. "Get her phone? I was gone for a few minutes, and suddenly Ivy is by the fountain and in the water for no reason. If it wasn't you, who else could it be?" With that, he shoved Lillian, wheelchair and all, into the pool. His voice was as cold as ice. "Lillian Hayes, out of respect for Nina, I tolerated your constant pestering, but Ivy is my line. Since you don't know what's good for you, you'll pay the price for what you've done." He then called over his bodyguards, ordering them to stand guard and prevent anyone from getting near to help her. The frigid water flooded Lillian's nose and mouth, choking her. She struggled alone in the water. The wound on her leg reopened, and blood bloomed in the water, dyeing it red. Her strength gradually drained away. She trembled uncontrollably from the pain as she slowly sank into the deep end. As her consciousness faded, the last thing she saw was the image of Ethan carrying Ivy away. An unknown amount of time passed before Lillian opened her eyes again, met by Nina's worried gaze. "I was gone for just a few hours. How did you end up in the pool? The doctor said if you'd been rescued a minute later, you might not have woken up." "You scared me to death." Remembering what had happened before she passed out, Lillian fell silent. She wanted to tell Nina the truth, but the thought that Ethan was Nina's brother made her hold her tongue. She shook her head weakly, her voice frail and exhausted. "I'm fine. Don't worry." Chapter 4, Nina's eyes immediately turned red. Though she didn't say anything more, she stayed by Lillian's bedside for the next few days. During that time, she casually brought up Ethan several times, as if trying to gauge Lillian's feelings. "Lily, knowing my brother, if it were anyone else who confessed to him so many times, he would have found a way to get rid of them. But he put up with you for so many years. It shows he has some feelings for you, even if he doesn't realize it himself. Are you sure you don't want to remember him?" If Lillian had heard this right after waking up, she might have believed it. But after the incident at the pool, she felt such a notion was nothing more than self-deception. She showed Nina the photos her colleagues had sent her over the past 2 days, pictures of Ethan shopping, dining, and going to the movies with Ivy. Her voice was as calm and still as a stagnant pond. "The only reason he tolerated me was for your sake, Nina. If fate wanted me to forget him, it means we weren't meant to be. Now that the person he was waiting for is back, it's time for me to let go of this relationship that was doomed from the start." Seeing that Lillian had truly thought it through, Nina didn't press further, just sighed deeply. Sigh, more than anyone, I hoped my brother would come to his senses and be with you. Then you'd be my sister-in-law, and we'd never have to be apart. But since you've decided to give up, I won't force it. I'm not going to get involved with my brother and his first love anymore. We'll always be best friends. Lillian nodded firmly and pulled her into a gentle hug. The two friends shared a few more quiet words before Nina went to handle the discharge paperwork and drove Lillian home. You've been cooped up in the hospital for so long, you must be sick of it. I'll throw a party, get some people together to celebrate your discharge. Thinking this might be the last time she'd see this group of friends, Lillian didn't refuse and went with her to the club. But when they reached the private room and pushed open the door, both of them froze. Seeing Ethan and Ivy sitting at the center of the room, Nina's face was filled with surprise. Brother, what are you doing here? A few of the friends who had organized the gathering pulled them inside, explaining, didn't you say the more the merrier? I invited Ethan and he brought Ivy along. Lively enough for you, right? Nina glared at the friend who spoke, her eyes wide with frustration. Lillian knew what she was worried about and quickly pulled her aside. It's fine. They're here, so be it. I don't remember the past anyway, so it won't upset me. Only then did Nina relent and sit down with her. The room was lively all evening, but the atmosphere remained subtly tense. Ethan took off his jacket and draped it over Ivy's shoulders. He shielded her from toast after toast, peeled fruit for her, and fed it to her as if they were the only two people in the room. Every gesture was intimate and doting, his affection on full display. Lillian watched quietly. Although a dull ache settled in her chest, it wasn't painful. Perhaps forgetting those memories was a blessing in disguise. Nina, however, thought she was heartbroken and quickly gathered a group to play games to distract her. Lillian's luck was good. She won about 10 rounds in a row before finally losing. Everyone clamored for her to accept a penalty. She didn't want to play any of their silly games, so she chose truth. Instantly, all eyes darted between her and Ethan, their voices buzzing with excitement. All right, then tell us about the most unforgettable relationship of your life. At the question, before Lillian could say a word, Ethan's expression darkened. He glanced at her instinctively, his eyes like ice. Lillian knew it was a warning, don't say anything foolish in front of Ivy, but now she remembered nothing. Even if she wanted to, she could only force out a few vague words to satisfy the crowd. The most unforgettable would have to be my first love, I guess. He's my best friend's brother. I think I fell for him at first sight. I wrote stacks of love letters, and the secret photos I took of him filled several thick albums. Everyone knew I was crazy about him, but he didn't like me back. She said it all with a candid smile, but the room fell into a dead silence. Ivy, who had been watching coldly from the side, sensed something and tugged on the arm of a grim-faced Ethan. Ethan, you and Miss Hayes. Ethan's heart jolted. He gripped her hand tightly and denied it flatly. There's nothing between us. From beginning to end, it was just her own one-sided infatuation. Chapter 5, he spoke every word with cutting finality, leaving no room for doubt. Without another moment's hesitation, he pulled Ivy to her feet and walked out under everyone's watchful eyes. The gazes that followed them were filled with pity and sympathy for Lillian. Nina, who had been silent all this time, could no longer contain herself and rushed out after them. Lillian realized what she was about to do and hurried after her, finding them arguing in the parking garage. Lily is my best friend, why would you humiliate her in front of so many people? She loved you for so many years, can't you show her a little kindness for the sake of her devotion? I tolerated her for 7 years, I rejected her tactfully countless times, for your sake isn't that kind enough. Her love has been nothing but an endless nuisance to me. Nina was so furious she was losing her mind, her voice cracking as she screamed. Don't worry, she will never love you again ever since you abandoned her on the side of the road, and she got into that car accident and suffered a concussion. I was only driving her home as a favor to you in the first place, why couldn't I leave her halfway? So what if she was in an accident? Even if time rewound 100 times, I would still abandon her 100 times for Ivy. If she's still holding a grudge over that, you tell her to stay the hell away from me. The sound of a car door slamming echoed from a distance. Not wanting them to know she had overheard their argument and create more awkwardness, Lillian quickly turned and left. Once she was back home alone, She scanned the entire apartment and then gathered up every single item related to Ethan Crawford that she had collected over the years. Then, she threw it all into the trash. Over the weekend, she stayed home and finished packing up most of her belongings. On Monday, Lillian went to the office and handed her prepared resignation letter to HR. The HR manager was stunned. "Weren't you in a car accident and still on leave? I heard the design director position opened up and Mr. Crawford was planning to promote you. Why are you suddenly resigning?" Nina had told her that after graduation, Lillian had joined the Crawford Corporation's design department just so she could see Ethan every day. For 3 years, she had worked diligently, all for the chance to get one step closer to him, to stand by his side legitimately. But now, she didn't remember him, and she had forgotten what it felt like to love him. So, facing the reluctant HR manager, she offered a small smile. "I want to go home. I'll be staying in my hometown from now on." The manager didn't try to persuade her further and handed back the stamped application. "All right then, I'll give this to Mr. Crawford for his signature, and then your resignation process will be complete." Chapter 6. On her way back from the HR office, Lillian was stopped by a colleague from her department. "Mr. Crawford just called a meeting for the design department. It seems he's going to announce the new director. It's starting any minute now. You should come with us." Lillian nodded and followed them to the conference room. Along the way, several colleagues congratulated her with beaming smiles. "Lillian, in your 3 years here, you've been part of so many major projects, and your work has won numerous international gold awards. Logically and emotionally, the director position should be yours. Exactly with your track record and how much Mr. Crawford values you, we'd all be completely behind you as the new director. When the good news is announced, you have to treat us to dinner tonight." Having worked together for so long, Lillian knew their words were sincere. She wanted to tell them she was about to resign, but since Ethan hadn't signed off on it yet, she decided to wait and announce it at dinner that evening. "Whether I become the new director or not doesn't matter, but I do want to treat everyone to dinner tonight. I have some news to share." The group chatted as they walked and soon arrived at the conference room. Lillian chose a seat in the corner. Once everyone was present, Ethan walked in right on time. He scanned the room and got straight to the point. "I'm sure you've all heard the rumors. I've called this meeting today to announce the new director of the design department. If anyone has anything to say, please speak freely." All eyes fell on Lillian. She wanted to prevent the decision from being announced before things were set in stone. After a moment's thought, she looked up, met Ethan's calm, emotionless gaze, took a deep breath and stood up. "Mr. Crawford, I am grateful for the trust you've placed in me over the years, entrusting me with so many projects. I, along with my colleagues, have worked hard to complete them and live up to that trust. While I don't know who you have in mind for the director position, before the official announcement, I would like to voluntarily apply to." Before she could say the words, "withdraw from consideration," Ethan cut her off. "Regarding the director position, among the 10 current designers in the department, the others lack the depth of work that you have. However, you lack seniority. Therefore, I have decided to bring in a new director with extensive experience and qualifications to fill this important role." As his words fell, everyone in the department was stunned. Lillian froze where she stood. In the next second, Ethan's voice echoed through the conference room. "Everyone, let me introduce you. The new director of the design department is Ivy Gardner." The conference room door was pushed open, and Ivy walked in with a smile, beginning her self-introduction. "Hello everyone, I'm Ivy Gardner. I have a PhD from the Milan Institute of Design and am a recipient of the European Young Designer Award." A dead silence fell over the room. Everyone exchanged glances, their expressions turning strange. It was simply because the awards Ivy mentioned in her introduction had been won by several of the designers already present. Furthermore, she had no professional work experience and was being parachuted into this position right after graduation. It was hard for everyone to accept, especially the senior designers who had been with the company for nearly 5 years. One of them couldn't help but speak up. "Mr. Crawford, we unanimously feel that Miss Gardner lacks the necessary experience and needs another couple of years of seasoning before she can take on the director role. In comparison, Lillian Hayes is far more qualified for this position." With one person speaking out, the rest of the department nodded in agreement. Ivy's eyes immediately turned red, and she looked at Ethan with a wounded expression. Seeing her tears, a flash of pain crossed Ethan's face. When his gaze swept back to Lillian, it was sharp and icy. Ivy is a top graduate from a prestigious institution and has won countless international awards. Her vision and abilities are beyond comparison with Lillian Hayes. Yes, Lillian has handled many projects, but that was only possible with the solid foundation and support of this department. If I were to put Ivy in charge, she could deliver the same results, if not better. Therefore, the position of design director belongs to Ivy, and this is not up for discussion. Chapter 7, being ridiculed so publicly. Even though Lillian no longer had any feelings for him, she was still humiliated, and her face turned pale. After his announcement, Ethan declared the meeting over and quickly walked out with Ivy. The HR manager, who had been waiting outside, saw him and immediately handed him Lillian's resignation letter. "Mr. Crawford, there's a resignation notice here that needs your review and signature." Ethan's eyes were cold. Without even looking at it, he signed his name. After watching him walk away with Ivy, the designers from the department all flocked to Lillian's side, offering words of comfort. But Lillian was perfectly calm. She smiled, clutching the signed agreement in her hand. "Actually, it doesn't matter if I'm the director or not, because I've already decided to resign. Mr. Crawford just signed off on my application. Today is my last day. The future is long and wide. Take care, everyone, and perhaps our paths will cross again." Hearing that she was leaving, everyone was shocked and reluctant to see her go. They even offered to go back to Mr. Crawford and fight for the director position for her. But Lillian just smiled, shook her head, and thanked them one by one. She returned to her desk and began packing her things. After work, she treated her colleagues to dinner and said her goodbyes amidst a somber atmosphere. When she got home, she contacted a real estate agent and listed her apartment at the lowest possible price. It sold the very next day. She completed the transfer paperwork and arranged with the buyer to move out in 2 days. After finishing all this, she received a call from Nina. "Lily, tomorrow's my birthday. You didn't forget, did you? I've been waiting for your gift. How could I forget your birthday? I've had your gift ready for a while. I'll make sure you get it tomorrow." Lillian not only had the gift ready, but also planned to tell Nina that she was leaving. In previous years, she would always arrive early at the birthday party for a chance to spend more time with Ethan. But this time, she waited until the party was halfway over before hailing a cab to go over. As usual, the birthday party was held at the Crawford family's estate. Lillian had visited the Crawford home countless times and knew it like the back of her hand. She slipped in through a back entrance. In the main hall, they were just blowing out the candles. Nina was surrounded by a crowd, her face beaming with happiness. Mr. and Mrs. Crawford stood to her left, smiling, while Ethan and Ivy stood to her right. They looked perfectly harmonious, like a family. Lillian watched from a distance and overheard the Crawford family's maids whispering. "The young master and Miss Gardner broke up so many years ago. I thought they were done for good, but it turns out it's still her after all this time. That's true devotion, isn't it? The young Mrs.'s best friend chased him for so many years and couldn't move his heart. It just shows how deeply he loves Miss Gardner. The master and madam have been pushing for marriage for years, and the young master always made excuses. This time, he brought her home himself. It looks like he's making a statement. Maybe good news is just around the corner." Chapter 8, Lillian had already forgotten her past with Ethan Crawford and was determined to let him go completely. From now on, whoever he loved or married had nothing to do with her. So, hearing these things stirred nothing within her. She silently joined in singing "Happy Birthday," and when she looked up again, her eyes met Ethan's. He frowned upon seeing her and leaned over to whisper something to Nina, who then looked over and squeezed her way out of the crowd. Lillian gave her a gentle hug, handed her the birthday gift, and wished her a happy birthday with a smile. Nina had been waiting for her all night and wanted to pull her over to have some cake, but Lillian shook her head. "It's a bit too loud with so many people. I won't go over. You go ahead and mingle. I'll wait for you in your room. I have something to tell you later." Nina, also worried that seeing Ethan would upset her, agreed. Lillian avoided the crowd and, knowing the way, went up to Nina's room on the 3rd floor. She sat on the sofa for half an hour, feeling a bit drowsy, and closed her eyes for a short nap. In a daze, she heard the door open and thought it was Nina returning. But when she opened her eyes, she saw Ivy Gardner. Ivy's face was grim, her gaze burning as she stared at Lillian, her tone anything but friendly. "Didn't you say you'd given up? Why do you keep showing up in front of Ethan? I'm telling you, his heart belongs only to me. No matter how many attention-seeking stunts you pull, he will never like you. You can't compete with me." Lillian hadn't expected her to come looking for a confrontation. She was stunned for a few seconds before she managed to explain. "I'm here to give Nina her birthday gift. I'll be leaving soon." Hearing this, the wariness in Ivy's eyes only intensified, now laced with a layer of disgust. "You've shamelessly clung to Ethan all these years, throwing yourself at him without a shred of dignity. Isn't it because you've been sweet-talking and manipulating Nina? It's really Ethan's rotten luck to have such a good-for-nothing, traitorous sister who can't tell right from wrong." Ivy could say the most horrible things about Lillian, and she wouldn't have cared. But hearing her start to insult Nina, Lillian's gaze turned cold. "Does Ethan know you talk about his own flesh and blood sister like this behind his back?" Faced with her question, Ivy sneered. "Ethan will dote on me unconditionally. So what if I insult her? Besides, you and Nina are a pair of shameless husses. Am I not telling the truth? Are you so angry because I hit a nerve? 7 years ago, you broke up with him out of the blue and left the country, nearly killing him. Nina, as his sister, was heartbroken for him but never said a single bad word about you. Now you want to crawl back and marry him, yet you badmouth Nina behind his back. Who do you think is the truly disgusting and despicable one here?" Ivy hadn't expected her to fire back with such words. Enraged, she slapped Lillian across the face. Lillian didn't back down, raising her hand and slapping her right back. Ivy clutched her stinging cheek, tears of fury welling in her eyes as she lunged at her. Lillian grabbed a handful of her hair, fighting back with all her might. In the struggle, they knocked over a scented candle on the table. The small flame caught the bedsheets, then ignited the carpet, quickly erupting into a major fire. Thick smoke filled the air. By the time they realized what was happening, the entire room was engulfed in flames. Lillian struggled to get to the door, but Ivy shoved her into the fire. The scorching flames licked at her skin, the burning pain causing her to tremble uncontrollably. As she tried to beat out the fire on her clothes, she saw the bedroom door being violently kicked open. Ethan rushed in. He was only a few feet away from her, but his gaze merely flickered over her for a split second. Then it locked onto Ivy. He raced towards her and swept her into his arms. The acrid smoke filled Lillian's lungs, making it harder and harder to breathe. She raised her burned, reddened hand and grabbed onto Ethan's leg. But he just glanced down, yanked his leg free, and strode away. Watching his figure disappear into the thick smoke, she lost consciousness and collapsed. Chapter 9. Lillian never thought she would survive. When she opened her eyes again, she was met with the sight of Nina, her eyes red from crying. "Lily, thank God you're okay. Otherwise, I would have felt guilty for the rest of my life. Does your wound hurt? Don't worry, I've already found the best doctor to treat you. You absolutely won't be left with any scars. It's just a small injury. I'm fine, Nina. Don't feel guilty, and don't worry." Despite the unbearable burning pain radiating from her hand, Lillian gritted her teeth and wrapped her arms around her friend. "Actually, there was something I wanted to tell you yesterday, but now it might be a bit late. You can't be mad at me when you hear it, okay? I've decided to go back to Bayview this afternoon. There's a childhood engagement waiting for me at home, and they're urging me to get married. My plane ticket is already booked. Will you see me off one last time?" Nina was stunned by her sudden departure. The tears she had just managed to stop began to flow again. "What? Why are you leaving all of a sudden and getting married? Does that mean you're never coming back? What will I do when I miss you?" "What?" Lillian sighed, and gently comforted her for a long time before she finally calmed down. After they shared more heartfelt words, Nina reluctantly went to handle her discharge paperwork. Lillian had just managed to change her clothes, wincing in pain, when Ethan pushed open the hospital room door, his face dark, his gaze menacing. "You hit Ivy, and then you started the fire to try and kill her, didn't you?" Seeing him again, Lillian felt nothing but a cold calm. Her tone was equally icy. "She told you that, and you just believed it, without even looking for proof?" "Yes. Whatever Ivy says, I will believe her unconditionally. I don't need any proof. Ethan didn't even want to give her a chance to explain, completely shutting down her attempts. Looking at his cold gaze, Lillian knew that no matter what she said, he wouldn't believe her. She stopped trying to make futile explanations and just smiled silently. "So, why are you here now?" "To make you go and apologize to Ivy, of course." Without another word, Ethan grabbed her injured hand and began to drag her away. The pressure on her wound made it bleed again, and the pain brought tears to Lillian's eyes. But she fought them back, struggling with all her might to break free from his grip. At that moment, Nina returned and saw the scene. She immediately stepped in front of Lillian, shielding her. Ethan glared at them, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Move, she is going to apologize to Ivy today?" "I won't move, I am certain Lily did nothing wrong. You can be biased towards Ivy, but my room has a security camera. Everything that happened yesterday was recorded. If you want to force Lily to apologize, you'll have to wait until we've all seen the footage," Nina shot back, her voice hoarse, refusing to back down. Ethan was so angry a vein throbbed on his forehead. Just as he was about to speak, a message from Ivy popped up on his phone. He glanced at the screen, swallowed his anger, and spat out one last sentence before storming off. "Fine, we'll watch the footage tonight. When the evidence is clear, let's see what you have to say then." As the door slammed shut, the room fell quiet again. Nina tended to Lillian's wound, apologizing over and over. Lillian gently shook her head and wiped away the tears from the corners of Nina's eyes. "Nina, you don't have to be sorry. The ones who did something wrong were never us. I'm leaving soon. From now on, you have to take good care of yourself." Nina nodded hard. She helped Lillian leave the hospital, pick up her luggage, and drove her straight to the airport. The boarding announcement for the flight to Bayview was already playing. Lillian gave her one last hug and then walked through the gate without looking back. Once on the plane, she deleted all of Ethan's contact information. The last message from Nina came through just then. "Lily, be happy every day when you get home. Don't worry, I will find out the truth tonight and get you justice." Lillian smiled at the darkening screen and turned her gaze to the white clouds outside the window. For her, the truth and justice didn't really matter anymore. After all, Ethan Crawford, along with all the pain he had brought her, had already vanished from her memory. She was saying goodbye to all of it, forever and completely. Chapter 10. Lillian, dragging her suitcase, stood wearily at the door. She tucked the bandage peeking out from her injured hand back into her sleeve, making sure it was hidden before raising her hand to knock. "Who is it?" Her mother's voice came from inside. Mrs. Hayes opened the door and saw Lillian, her eyes wide with surprise. "Lily, you're really back? I thought you were just saying that." She turned and shouted into the house, "Honey, it's Lily, she's back." "What?" "Lily's really back, Mr." Hayes shot up from the sofa and hurried to the door. He took Lillian's suitcase inside while Mrs. Hayes linked arms with her, guiding her in. "Why did you really come back? You and Ethan Crawford." Before her mother could finish, Lillian cut her off. "Mom, I was in a car accident and lost my memory. I don't remember anything about him." Hearing about the accident, Mrs. Hayes immediately wanted to take Lillian for a checkup. Afraid her mother would see the injury on her hand, Lillian quickly stopped her. "I'm fine now, really. You don't have to worry. I was blind before, loving someone I shouldn't have and clinging to him for so many years. Maybe this amnesia is for the best, a penance for my past foolishness. What about that childhood engagement you mentioned? I always refused to honor it before, which must have hurt their feelings. Now that I'm back, I'd like to meet him." At her words, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes both chuckled. They pulled Lillian into a loving embrace. "Silly girl, what childhood engagement? We saw how you were throwing yourself at your best friend's brother with no results, so we made it up to trick you. There's no engagement. You're free to be with whomever you want. Your father and I would never force you, but not that friend's brother. All those years, it was all one-sided. A love like that is just too exhausting." Hearing her parents' gentle words, Lillian's eyes welled up, and she hugged them tighter. "Yes, I know, Mom and Dad. Maybe this amnesia was a chance from heaven. I will never like him again." Lillian spent the next 2 blissful days at home, determined to start a new life. She sent out a few rounds of resumes, and successfully received an interview notice from Thorne Industries in Bayview. "Mom, I have an interview this afternoon. I'm heading out," Lillian called towards the kitchen as she put on her shoes. Mrs. Hayes poked her head out, concerned. "Be safe, be careful on your way." Standing outside the Thorn Industries building, Lillian saw she had some time to spare and decided to grab a coffee first. "Order number 627, please come to the counter." Lillian walked to the pickup counter to get her coffee, but as she reached for it, her hand brushed against a man's. "Sorry," Lillian said, quickly retracting her hand. She checked the number on her receipt. It was indeed 627. Puzzled, she looked up at the man, who was also looking at her. He held up his own coffee. "The label says 626. I think the barista called the wrong number." Just then, the barista brought another coffee over. "I'm so sorry, miss. I called the wrong number. This is your coffee." Lillian took the coffee and waved her hand with a smile. "It's all right. Hi, I'm Samuel Thorne." The man stopped her, extending his hand. "I work here too. We might be colleagues soon." Hearing this, Lillian shook his hand. "Hello, I'm Lillian Hayes." The name Lillian Hayes sounded familiar to Samuel, but he didn't dwell on it. "I hope your interview goes well. See you around." Neither of them expected to see each other again so soon. When Lillian walked into the conference room with her resume and saw Samuel Thorne sitting in the center seat, she was so surprised she forgot to introduce herself. Samuel, who had been looking down at his phone, noticed the newcomer hadn't spoken. He looked up and was surprised to see it was Lillian. "Good afternoon, interviewers. My name is Lillian Hayes. I graduated from..." The interview went smoothly, and her start date was quickly confirmed. As Lillian was leaving, Samuel called out to her. "What a coincidence. I'm a manager at Thorn Industries, in charge of the design department. Since we'll be colleagues, and it's getting late, how about I treat you to dinner?" Samuel's forwardness was a bit much for Lillian, and she wasn't used to it. She declined. "Please don't trouble yourself, Manager Thorne. I have plans tonight." Hearing she had plans, Samuel quickly asked, "With your boyfriend?" Lillian didn't understand why he was asking, but she answered politely, "No." Samuel breathed a sigh of relief, as long as it wasn't a boyfriend. Chapter 11. Lillian's onboarding went smoothly. She was a strong performer and had a gentle way with people, so she quickly integrated into the design department at Thorn Industries. However, as she fiddled with the flowers on her desk, she let out a troubled sigh. A colleague next to her heard it and leaned over. "Flowers again? If I had a suitor sending me flowers every day, I certainly wouldn't be sighing." Lillian pulled out 2 roses and handed them over. "Hope you find someone soon, too." Lillian's distress wasn't about having a suitor, but that the suitor was Samuel Thorne, her current boss. That extra layer of professional hierarchy made her uneasy. On one hand, because of what happened with Ethan, she had no desire to be in a relationship right now. On the other, she was afraid that if their dynamic was discovered, their boss-subordinate relationship would become fodder for office gossip. "Lily, would you be free for dinner tonight?" Lillian received another invitation from Samuel. Previously, she had always declined immediately. But today, Lillian deleted the rejection she had typed in the chat box and replied, "Okay." Samuel replied instantly. Lillian could feel his excitement even through the text. "I'll book a restaurant. How about Italian?" "Sounds good." Lillian had agreed to Samuel's invitation because she wanted to take the opportunity to clarify things between them. When Lillian arrived at the restaurant, Samuel was already there. A waiter led her to the table, and Samuel handed her a bouquet. "I saw you giving the roses away today. Don't you like them?" Lillian lowered her head and gently sniffed the beautifully wrapped jasmine. "No, I love the flowers. What about the person who sent them?" The question caught Lillian off guard. After a long moment, she said, "Samuel, I don't think we're a good match." "Lily, I'm serious about you." Lillian couldn't give Samuel an answer and simply remained silent. As a suitor, Samuel was perfect. He sent fresh flowers every day, along with various gifts tucked with love notes. But despite his pursuit, he never acted inappropriately at the office. He knew when to advance and when to retreat, always maintaining a sense of propriety. They sat in silence, the only sound the soft melody of the restaurant's violin. "Let's eat first." It was Samuel who finally broke the silence. Lillian felt a knot of anxiety in her chest. She barely touched her food but drank quite a bit of wine, feeling a slight buzz. Samuel took her wine glass away, murmuring, "Don't drink anymore, you'll get drunk." Perhaps it was the alcohol, but the grievances Lillian had suppressed came tumbling out. "I've already forgotten him, so why does my heart still hurt? What did he do to you?" Samuel wondered who the he Lillian was talking about could be. Lillian, slightly tipsy, mumbled, "It was my fault for chasing him for so long, but I'd already let go after I lost my memory. Why didn't he listen to my explanation before pushing me into the water? Why did he just take her word for it and assume it was my fault?" As she spoke, Lillian revealed the burn scar on her arm, which, though healed, still looked stark and angry. Samuel's pupils contracted as he saw the scar. His fingers trembled as he reached out to touch it. From Lillian's fragmented words, Samuel could piece together the general story. He surmised that Lillian had encountered a scumbag in her past, had her heart broken, and that was why she had repeatedly rejected his advances. His eyes filled with pain for her. He leaned down and gently kissed the scar. "Lily, I will help you let go of him completely and accept me." Chapter 12, Director Gardner, here is the design draft for the group's new product launch. If you could look it over, and if there are no issues, I'll submit it for signature. Ivy Gardner took the design file from the young woman, gave it a cursory glance, and tossed it aside. "Is this the kind of design you think is worthy of the CEO's signature?" Faced with Ivy's question, the young woman, Amy, panicked, at a loss for what to do. This was the final design decided on by the team, led by Miss Hayes before. That was the worst thing she could have said. It was like adding fuel to the fire. Ivy swept the documents off her desk. They scattered across the floor. "Tell Mr. Crawford that Lillian Hayes's previous designs are inadequate. I will lead the design department in creating a new one." Amy seemed to want to say something more, but Ivy barked at her. "Didn't you hear me? Get out." Tears streamed down Amy's face. She hastily gathered the papers from the floor and fled the office. "Amy, what did Director Gardner say?" her colleagues asked. "She said it's not good enough. She's going to lead us in a redesign." Seeing Amy in tears, the others rushed to comfort her. Everyone was seething with frustration. It had only been a few days since Ivy took over, and every time someone went to report to her, they got yelled at. All their previous design work had been rejected, but she never gave a reason why. The department was already unhappy about her being parachuted in, and her management's style made everyone miserable. "I quit," a senior designer slammed his ID badge on the table. Seeing someone take the lead, several other senior designers followed suit. "With my experience, I can find a job anywhere. Why should I stay here and put up with her nonsense?" No talent, but a huge temper. After being oppressed by Ivy for so long, one after another, the team members submitted their resignations to HR. HR, suddenly flooded with resignations from the design department, didn't know how to handle it and reported it directly to Ethan Crawford. "What have you been doing in the design department?" Ethan angrily threw the stack of resignation letters at Ivy. Having never been yelled at by Ethan like this before, Ivy's eyes turned red with grievance. "I just felt their previous designs weren't good enough and wanted them to redo them. I never thought they'd threaten me by resigning." Ethan had always turned a blind eye to Ivy's actions at the company. As long as she didn't cross a major line, he wouldn't interfere. But this time, a full 22 people from the design department had submitted their resignations. On top of that, the sales of the company's new jewelry line had plummeted. Facing pressure from the shareholders, Ethan had no choice but to step in. "Why don't you go home and rest for a while? I'll appoint a new director to manage the department. When you're feeling better, you can manage it alongside them." Ethan felt this was a way to let her save face, but Ivy, hearing this, stormed out and slammed the door. Ethan rubbed his temples in frustration. Thinking about the recent chaos in the design department, he couldn't help but remember how things were when Lillian was there. Back then, there had never been a mass resignation, and the products they designed sold very well. Ethan knitted his brow. Why am I suddenly thinking of that woman, Lillian Hayes? Remembering Ivy's tear-streaked face, Ethan still picked out a gift and sent her a message. "Ivy, I was wrong today. I bought you a gift. How about we have dinner tonight?" Ivy received the message with a satisfied smile, deliberately waiting a while before replying. "All right, since you put it that way, I'll reluctantly forgive you." That evening, Ethan had dinner with Ivy, and afterwards they went for a walk along the river. Ivy linked her arm through his, pouting playfully. "Will you take me to the amusement park tomorrow?" Ethan had little interest in such places, though Lillian had dragged him there a couple of times before. He was about to refuse, but an image of Lillian on the carousel flashed through his mind. As if possessed, He nodded and agreed to her request. Chapter 13, Ethan. It took Ivy calling his name twice for Ethan Crawford to snap out of his thoughts. "What is it?" Ivy said, annoyed. "What's wrong with you today? Why do you keep zoning out?" Ethan couldn't answer her. This was the same amusement park he had visited with Lillian, and for some reason, seeing familiar sights kept bringing her to mind. When he didn't answer, Ivy grew even angrier. Ethan quickly tried to placate her. "I'm sorry, didn't you want to ride the carousel? I'll go with you." Hearing that Ethan was willing to ride the carousel with her, Ivy's mood instantly brightened. After all, he had always refused to ride what he called little girl rides. This time, he didn't even object when she placed a childish cartoon headband on his head. The carousel offered a photo service, and Ivy paid extra to have the staff take more pictures. Ethan sat stiffly on his carousel horse, feeling completely out of place. When the ride finally ended, Ivy pulled him over to choose photos. On the wall of photos of park visitors, Ethan saw one of him and Lillian. It must have been from Lillian's college days when the three of them, he, Lillian, and Nina, had come together. The photo must have been taken by Nina with a Polaroid. It was obvious who had put it up on the wall. "Ethan, the staff said that's the couple's photo wall over there. Let's put ours up too." Ethan was about to stop Ivy, but she was already heading that way. He hurried after her, but it was too late. Ivy had seen the picture. She ripped the photo of him and Lillian off the wall and demanded, "So that's why you've been distracted all day? You were thinking about Lillian Hayes." Ethan's lips moved, but no explanation came out. His silence was as good as a confession. Furious, Ivy tore the photo to shreds, threw it into a nearby trash can, and stormed off. The date ended in disaster. Ethan picked up a fallen piece of the photo. There was writing on the back. He recognized Lillian's handwriting. The fragment only showed 4 words. "Lily loves Ethan." Ethan stared at the photo piece, lost in thought. After a long hesitation, he put it in his pocket. Back at her apartment, Ivy smashed everything in the living room to vent her frustration. She checked her phone, expecting an apology from Ethan, but there was nothing. She threw her phone to the ground in a rage. For several days, Ethan didn't contact her to apologize. Faced with his cold shoulder, Ivy, though angry, had to be the first to back down. "Ethan, I was too impulsive the other day." Ivy went to Ethan's office, tugging on his sleeve coquettishly. Since Ethan was in the wrong to begin with, and now that Ivy was apologizing, he couldn't say much more. "You can go back to work downstairs," he said, offering her an out. Ivy didn't push her luck. "Thank you, Ethan. Let's not fight anymore, okay?" Ethan replied with a noncommittal. When Ivy returned to the design department, the newly promoted director was already settled in the deputy director's office. Remembering Ethan's criticism, Ivy forced a smile and greeted the other designers. They all ignored her. Ivy's hand dropped awkwardly, the fake smile vanishing from her face. As she walked back to her office, she could hear them whispering about her. Combined with the amusement park incident, Ivy blamed it all on Lillian Hayes. Chapter 14, the more Ivy thought about it, the angrier she became. She swept all the documents off her desk. The sound of files scattering on the floor drew the attention of those outside, who couldn't help but glance toward her office. After her outburst, Ivy glared at the people outside, then stood up and slammed the door shut. "Who's going to talk to Director Gardner about the design competition?" Everyone shook their heads. No one wanted to step on that landmine. The deputy director had no choice but to go himself. He sidestepped the scattered files on the floor and placed the competition guidelines on Ivy's desk. "There's a company-sponsored design competition this year. These are the guidelines. The CEO has asked you to lead the department in creating the entry." Hearing that it was an order from Ethan, Ivy finally picked it up. She glanced at it and said to the deputy director, "You can go." Because of the competition, Ivy was unusually focused for the next 2 days, holing up in her office working on design drafts. She would sketch on a piece of paper, only to crumple it up and toss it aside moments later. Ivy wasn't particularly talented in design. The awards she had won in college meant nothing in a department full of skilled designers like the one at Crawford Corporation. If she had worked with the rest of the department, it wouldn't have been a major issue. But Ivy was determined to prove she was better than Lillian, so she refused to let anyone else get involved. Ethan had pushed for her to get the director position against everyone's advice. Everyone thought she had gotten the job through connections and lacked ability. She was going to show them all that she, Ivy Gardner, was superior to Lillian Hayes. Just when she was at a dead end, she found a beautifully drawn design sketch in Ethan's office. "Ethan, whose sketch is this?" Ethan took it and realized it was the one Lillian had given him years ago. He remembered Lillian excitedly presenting the design to him. "Ethan, this is a ring I designed. It's called Spring. The inspiration comes from, enough, can you just not bother me while I'm working?" He had impatiently tossed the sketch aside. Lillian's smile had frozen. She had quietly picked up the sketch, placed it back on his desk, and left his office. Now, looking at the sketch, Ethan was lost in thought for a moment before answering Ivy. "It's Lillian's." Hearing that it was Lillian's, a flicker of jealousy crossed Ivy's face, but she acted nonchalant as she put it down. "Has this design ever been produced?" Ethan didn't know why she was asking, but he answered truthfully. "No." He paused, then added, "She designed it for me back then." A few days later, Ivy submitted the design for the competition to Ethan. He looked at the ring in the sketch. It felt familiar, like Lillian's spring design. He hesitated for a moment, but ultimately said nothing. Lillian, the woman who had constantly chased him, was finally out of his life. It was what he had always wanted. But lately, he found himself thinking about her frequently, a feeling that unsettled him. So, even though he recognized the similarity between Ivy's design and the sketch Lillian had left behind, he didn't say anything. "You've worked hard. After the competition, I'll take you on vacation." Ivy's head shot up in surprise. Her relationship with Ethan hadn't been progressing. Although they were together, she could feel that he still thought about Lillian and wasn't as repulsed by her as he claimed. This gave her a sense of crisis. She had to secure her hold on him to take their relationship to the next level. Hearing him offer to take her on vacation, Ivy saw it as the perfect opportunity to deepen their connection. She pressed herself against him, trying to kiss him, but he gently pushed her away. "It's working hours," Ethan said coolly, picking up another file. "If there's nothing else, you can go." Chapter 15, Lillian, I'm entrusting this design competition to you. Can you handle it? Lillian stood up and addressed Samuel Thorne. "I've only just joined the company. A task like this should probably go to one of the more senior designers." This was a decision made after consulting with the others. "Lillian, your talent is clear to everyone." The other people in the conference room nodded in agreement with Samuel's statement. Seeing that everyone had such faith in her, Lillian no longer demurred and accepted the task gracefully. "I will do my absolute best not to disappoint your trust." After the morning meeting, Samuel asked Lillian to stay behind. "Manager Thorne, did you need something?" Samuel looked a little displeased at her formal address. "Lily, we're friends. You don't have to be so formal." Ever since the night Lillian had gotten drunk and Samuel had taken her home, she had become less resistant to his pursuit. Even Mr. and Mrs. Hayes were very fond of Samuel, telling Lillian on several occasions, "That young man, Samuel, seems like a great catch." But Lillian wasn't ready for a relationship yet, so they continued to interact as friends. Lillian preferred not to have too many personal entanglements with Samuel at work. "If there's nothing else, Manager Thorne, I'll get going." Samuel stopped her. "Crawford Corporation will also be participating in this competition. I had someone look into it. Their entry is being designed primarily by Ivy Gardner." Lillian understood what Samuel was implying and nodded. "I understand." The theme of the competition was the 4 seasons. Lillian's mind immediately went to the spring design she had created before. She decided to design the other pieces based on that original concept. A few days later, Lillian presented her completed designs to Samuel. Samuel looked through them, full of praise. "Lily, your designs are absolutely brilliant, especially this spring piece. The results of the competition should be out in a week or 2. You'll come with me to the announcement." Lillian felt a little embarrassed by his praise. On the day the results were to be announced, Lillian and Samuel boarded a flight to Capital City. Samuel noticed that Lillian had been looking uneasy ever since they arrived. "Ethan Crawford will be there today. If you're..." "It's fine. He and I have nothing to do with each other anymore." Lillian cut him off mid-sentence. She had amnesia and had forgotten everything about Ethan Crawford, not the grand pursuit she had mounted, nor the pain he had caused her. But she remembered with crystal clarity everything he had done to her after she lost her memory. As for Ethan Crawford, Lillian wanted nothing more to do with him. When they arrived at the venue, Lillian entered with Samuel and immediately saw Ethan with Ivy Gardner on his arm. Ethan and Ivy saw her at the same time. Ivy, clinging to Ethan, walked over to greet them. Lillian, what a coincidence. Seeing Ivy's smug expression, Lillian wanted to avoid any drama. She took Samuel's arm to move away. Her retreat only fueled Ivy's arrogance. She looked at Samuel standing next to Lillian. Lillian, is this your new boyfriend? Ethan stared unhappily at Lillian and Samuel. Lillian was no longer chasing him, yet when Ivy asked that question, a part of him was terrified that Lillian would say yes. When Lillian didn't answer right away, Ivy became even more smug. Don't tell me you're still not over my boyfriend. Lillian was about to retort, but Samuel stepped in front of her. Lily is my girlfriend, please show some respect. With that, Samuel led Lillian away. It wasn't until they were seated that he apologized. I'm sorry, Lily. She was being so arrogant, Lillian shook her head and smiled. It's okay, thank you for defending me. Chapter 16, the results were about to be announced. Everyone sat waiting for the host on stage to read the winner's name. Lillian felt a knot of nervousness in her stomach. Just as the host opened the envelope, someone suddenly walked on stage and whispered something in their ear. Ladies and gentlemen, it has come to our attention that there has been an incident of plagiarism in this competition. To ensure fairness, we will be re-evaluating the submissions in question. The word plagiarism sent a wave of murmurs through the audience. Plagiarism was a serious offense. Once accused, a designer's reputation in the industry would be ruined. The organizers had intended to handle the matter privately, but due to the audience's demands, they displayed both of the allegedly plagiarized works on the large screen behind the stage. Lillian looked up and saw, to her disbelief, her own work and Ivy Gardner's. She looked over at Ivy and Ethan in shock. Ivy met her gaze with a triumphant smirk. Samuel quickly asked, Lily, did you show your design drafts to anyone? Samuel had absolute faith in Lillian. He didn't believe for a second that she would plagiarize someone else's work. In this situation, his only conclusion was that her drafts had been leaked. Lillian was about to stand up and defend herself when Ivy stood up and twisted the truth. Lillian Hayes plagiarized my design. You're the one who copied me. Lillian was about to produce her own design drafts when she heard Ivy say, I have the original manuscript for this design. Ivy handed her manuscript to the event staff, who then gave it to the judges. Lillian had no choice but to submit her own manuscript as well. This was her design, she had never copied anyone. Samuel placed a reassuring hand on Lillian's shoulder. It's okay, the judges will get to the bottom of this, I believe you. Everyone waited for the judge's verdict. The host read out the result. After careful examination, the judges have determined that Miss Ivy Gardner's initial draft predates Miss Lillian Hayes's. That sentence was as good as a guilty verdict for Lillian. In disbelief, Lillian rushed to the judge's table and took both manuscripts. The moment she saw the one Ivy had provided, she knew it was her own work, something she must have accidentally left behind at Crawford Corporation when she resigned. The audience was abuzz with whispers, all condemning Lillian for plagiarism. She looked pleadingly at Ethan. Only he could confirm that the manuscript was hers and clear her name. Ethan saw her desperate gaze, but he said nothing. He didn't defend her. Ethan, did you give my manuscript to Ivy Gardner? Lillian could no longer control her emotions. She held the manuscript up to him, her voice filled with disbelief. Ethan felt a pang of sympathy and was about to speak, but Ivy tugged on his arm. The judges were also waiting for his answer. This design manuscript belongs to Ivy Gardner. As soon as he said it, the tiny flicker of hope in Lillian's heart was extinguished. She felt all the strength drain from her body, and she nearly collapsed. Samuel rushed forward to support her. Ivy, seeing Lillian's state, was filled with smug satisfaction. After the chaotic scene died down, she walked over to Lillian and Samuel, her voice dripping with mockery. Thorne Industries involved in a plagiarism scandal. How does that sound for a headline? Ethan, standing beside her, did nothing to stop her, merely watching with cold indifference. Samuel didn't want to argue with Ivy. He turned to Ethan. I never thought the CEO of Crawford Corp would help a plagiarist twist the truth. Ethan just glanced at Lillian coolly. Is there a problem with defending my own girlfriend? Seeing his attitude, Samuel wanted to punch him, but Lillian held him back. Lillian thought Samuel was worried about the company's stock price. "I'll resign from the company and take all the blame. It won't affect Thorne's stock." Samuel quickly clarified, "I'm not worried about the stock price. I'm angry on your behalf." Ethan had no interest in listening to Samuel's sweet nothings to Lillian. He took Ivy's arm to leave, but Lillian's voice stopped him. "Ethan Crawford, for all the years I chased you, let's just say I was wrong. But you pushing me into the pool, leaving me in the fire, and this plagiarism incident today, let's call that my punishment. We're even now." Ethan's steps faltered. After a long moment, a single word escaped his lips. "Fine." Chapter 17. Although Samuel Thorne believed Lillian and was willing to risk the company's stock price to protect her, Lillian didn't want to cause him trouble. She submitted her resignation and took full responsibility for the plagiarism scandal. As Lillian packed her things in the design department, her colleagues were sad to see her go. They all believed in her innocence. With Lillian's talent, she had no reason to plagiarize. When Samuel returned from a board meeting, he saw Lillian packing and rushed over to stop her. "I'll explain things to the board. You're the victim in this. How can we let you take the blame? With a plagiarism accusation on your record, how will you ever work in this industry again?" Lillian was deeply grateful and touched by Samuel's support, but she really didn't want to drag him down. Because of this incident, even though Samuel was the second son of the Thorne family, he had been repeatedly questioned by the board and had been working late for days to handle the fallout. "Samuel, thank you. I've saved up some money from working over the years. I think I'll take a break for a while." Samuel tried to convince her to stay, but Lillian refused. "All right, then take some time off. Once this blows over, I'll bring you back." Seeing how exhausted Lillian looked, Samuel thought a break might do her good. Worried that Lillian would spiral into depression if left alone at home, Samuel made a point of visiting her every few days, practically dragging her out to get some fresh air. Lillian couldn't say no to him, and with her parents also worried about her being cooped up, she didn't refuse his invitations. Through these frequent outings, Lillian's attitude towards Samuel began to soften. Today was no exception. Samuel had booked a table at a restaurant and invited her for dinner. The restaurant was in a high-rise building by the river, offering a spectacular view. As Lillian ate, she gazed at the scenery, feeling her mood lift. She was just about to comment on how empty the restaurant was when she saw Samuel approaching with a bouquet of flowers, holding a jewelry box and kneeling on one knee. "Lily, I love you. Will you be with me?" As he spoke, he opened the box, revealing a diamond bracelet inside. "I designed this for you. Lily, please don't say no." After spending so much time together, Lillian had come to accept Samuel. Moreover, her amnesia felt like a chance from heaven to let go of what wasn't hers and start a new life. So, when Samuel confessed his feelings, she accepted the flowers and answered him. "Yes." Samuel was so stunned that Lillian had agreed that he just knelt there, frozen. It was Lillian who spoke first. "Aren't you going to put the bracelet on me?" Samuel fumbled to take the bracelet out of the box and carefully fastened it around Lillian's wrist. Then, with trembling hands, he leaned down and kissed the scar on her forearm. "I, Samuel Thorne, swear that I will love Lillian Hayes forever." When Lillian got home, her head was still spinning. She looked at the bracelet on her wrist, feeling as if the memory of his trembling kiss still lingered there. Chapter 18. Although Ethan Crawford had helped Ivy Gardner cover up the plagiarism, his attitude towards her became increasingly cold upon their return. Ivy gritted her teeth, convinced that Ethan still couldn't forget Lillian Hayes. "That woman has already been driven away like a stray dog, yet her ghost still haunts us," she thought. With this in mind, Ivy picked up her phone and sent Ethan a message. "Ethan, I think I'm sick. Can you come see me?" After all, she was the white moonlight he had loved for years. Upon receiving the message, Ethan went over. When he arrived at Ivy's apartment, he found her lounging on the sofa in a slinky nightgown. Her complexion was fine. She didn't look sick at all. Ethan immediately understood what was going on and was displeased. He was about to leave, but Ivy grabbed his hand. "I'm sorry, Ethan. You've been so cold to me lately, I was scared, so I lied about being sick." Hearing this, most of Ethan's annoyance dissipated. Ivy pressed her advantage. "Have dinner with me, please." Ethan didn't refuse again and sat down at the dining table. Ivy poured 2 glasses of red wine from a decanter and handed one to Ethan. He accepted it, but after just 2 sips, he felt something was wrong. A wave of heat washed over him, and he instinctively loosened his tie. Seeing this, Ivy stood up and straddled his lap, her hands moving to unbutton his shirt. Ethan realized this was a setup. Fighting the discomfort in his body, he shoved Ivy off his lap and onto the floor. Ivy was in disbelief that he would push her away. Ethan staggered towards the door, but Ivy wrapped her arms around him from behind. "Ethan, don't go," she pleaded. Ethan viciously pinned her against the wall. "All these years, I thought you were sweet and sensible. Even when you did things that were out of line, I told myself it was because you cared about me. But to think you would stoop to setting me up, I never thought you were this kind of person." Having been pushed away by Ethan multiple times, and now being physically restrained, Ivy could no longer keep up the pretense. "The only reason you won't accept me is because you're still thinking about that woman, Lillian Hayes, isn't it?" "This has nothing to do with Lillian." Ivy suddenly burst into manic laughter. "Ethan, you talk about how much you despised Lillian for chasing you, but it seems you enjoyed her pursuit all along. You've always cared about her, haven't you?" Looking at Ivy's twisted expression, Ethan said sternly, "You need to calm down." He pushed her away and left without another word. Back at his own home, after dealing with his physical discomfort, Ethan lay in bed, replaying Ivy's words in his mind. "You enjoyed her pursuit. You've always cared about her." He murmured the words to himself and took out the torn photo piece he had picked up at the amusement park. He traced the small fragment with his finger, his mind flooded with memories of the 7 years Lillian had spent chasing him, following him everywhere. Only now did Ethan have to admit that Ivy was right. He had, without realizing it, grown accustomed to having Lillian by his side. The next day, Ethan went to see Nina. "Where's that security footage you wanted me to watch?" Caught off guard, Nina took a moment to understand. "What footage?" "The video from your room, when Ivy and Lillian were there and the fire started." Nina looked at him with scorn. "Didn't you say you believed Ivy back then? You promised me you'd watch it that night, but one phone call from her and you changed your mind. Why are you asking for it now? What, you regret it? You want to win Lily back?" Ethan had no defense against Nina's sarcasm. Seeing his silence, Nina continued, "It's too late. Lily messaged me a few days ago. She has a boyfriend. I think his name is Samuel Thorne." "What boyfriend?" The sudden increase in his volume startled Nina. After a moment, she said, "Lily is with Samuel Thorne." Ethan didn't want to believe it, but Nina's expression didn't look like she was lying. "Impossible. She must be using him to get to me," Ethan muttered, dazed. Chapter 19, seeing Ethan's dazed state, Nina felt a small sense of satisfaction for Lillian. But he was still her brother. With a sigh, she handed him all the evidence she had gathered. "Think about it carefully. If you go back now, you might still have a chance," Nina said, her voice full of resignation. Ethan locked himself in his room and went through everything. Only then did he realize how terribly wrong he had been, how much he had hurt Lillian because of his blind faith in Ivy. Regret washed over him. He felt Nina was right. If he went to win Lillian back now, he might still have a chance. The thought spurred him into action. He immediately had his assistant look up Lillian's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Samuel received a message that Ethan was looking for Lillian. "Lily, my assistant told me today that Ethan Crawford is trying to find you. What do you want to do?" Samuel left the decision entirely up to Lillian. Lillian was first confused, then disgusted by the news. "Why would he suddenly be looking for me? Aren't he and Ivy Gardner madly in love? I heard he and Ivy had a falling out." Samuel wrapped his arms around Lillian. Lillian pouted, annoyed. "So he breaks up with Ivy and comes running back to me? What am I, some convenient backup plan?" Lillian couldn't fathom what she had ever seen in such a man to have chased him for 7 years. Samuel knew Lillian had amnesia, but the news of Ethan's return still worried him. He was afraid that Lillian's memory might suddenly return and she would go back to Ethan. Lillian saw the worry in Samuel's eyes and reassured him. "Don't worry, I've seen his true colors now. No matter what he does to try and win me back, I will never get back together with him." Her words eased Samuel's fears. "In that case, let's go on a trip for a while." Lillian didn't want to run into Ethan, so she agreed to Samuel's suggestion. When Ethan arrived at Lillian's apartment building, he felt a strange nervousness as he stood before her door. He rehearsed what he would say a few times before raising his hand to knock. The person who opened the door was not Lillian, but her mother. Mrs. Hayes recognized him and immediately tried to slam the door shut, but Ethan blocked it. "Mrs. Hayes, is Lily?" Before he could finish, Mrs. Hayes cut him off. "You have the nerve to mention Lily. Our Lily is doing very well now, and we are very happy with that young man, Samuel." Ethan tried to explain, but Mrs. Hayes pulled the door shut, leaving him with one final sentence. "Stop bothering Lily." Ethan stood dejectedly outside Lillian's door. He wanted to ask where she was, but he had no reason to knock again. Having hit a wall, Ethan returned to Capital City. Nina saw his dejected state and knew he must have been turned away. "Did you see Lily?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. Nina considered telling him where Lillian was, but then she thought of all the pain Lillian had endured and decided this was for the best. If Ethan had to work hard to win her back, maybe he would truly cherish her if he succeeded. So Nina said, "Lily used to chase after you all the time, and you didn't appreciate it at all. Now that she's really gone, you're learning how hard it is to be the one doing the chasing." Ethan didn't argue, simply letting his sister lecture him. Nina was right. This was what he deserved. He had been wrong. Ethan remained in a slump for days. Ivy tried to see him a few times, but he sent her away. Seeing that Ethan was genuinely remorseful, Nina finally relented. "Lily is back from her trip." The moment he heard this, Ethan was ready to rush back to Bayview to find Lillian. Chapter 20, Ethan drove through the night to Bayview. As he arrived at Lillian's apartment complex, he saw her walking out. He was about to approach her when he saw Samuel Thorne by her side. Lillian and Samuel were holding hands. Samuel said something that made Lillian laugh. The bright, genuine smile on her face made Ethan freeze. He remembered how she used to smile like that when she followed him around, but now that smile was for someone else. He didn't reveal himself, just watched them from behind a hedge, torturing himself with the sight of their intimacy. Ethan followed them all the way to another apartment complex, watching them go upstairs together. He almost couldn't take it anymore. He wanted to storm up there and confront them. But just as he was about to go up, he saw Samuel come back down alone, get in his car, and drive away. Only then did Ethan calm down. He convinced himself it wasn't real. Samuel's boyfriend status was just a ploy by Lillian to make him jealous. The thought gave him a renewed sense of hope. The next morning, Ethan dressed carefully, bought a bouquet of flowers, and went to Lillian's front door. Lillian had just woken up when she heard the knock. Thinking it was Samuel, she opened the door saying, "Why are you so early today?" When she saw Ethan, she instinctively tried to slam the door shut. Ethan, quick on his feet, blocked it and offered her the flowers. Lillian didn't take them. Instead, she asked coldly, "How do you know where I live? Are you stalking me?" Ethan ignored her question and began his plea. "Lily, I was wrong about what happened before. I came to ask for your forgiveness." Lillian had no patience to listen to him. All she wanted was to close the door. But Ethan was too strong. She couldn't shut the door. In fact, he was slowly prying it open. Just then, Samuel came out of the elevator. Seeing Ethan at Lillian's door, he rushed over, pulled Ethan aside, and stood protectively in front of Lillian. "Ethan Crawford, what do you think you're doing to Lily?" Ethan paid no attention to Samuel, continuing his heartfelt confession to Lillian. "Lily, I broke up with Ivy. I was wrong before, but I see my mistake now. I know my own heart. Lily, you don't have to use Samuel to provoke me anymore." Lillian couldn't believe his audacity. "Ethan Crawford, I'm with Samuel because he's a wonderful person and I love him. It has nothing to do with you. I've made it very clear, we are even." Ethan refused to believe her, stubbornly recounting stories of her past pursuit of him. Lillian couldn't stand it anymore and cut him off. "Ethan Crawford, I've forgotten everything. Just let me go." Ethan froze, his voice trembling. "Lily, what have you forgot? When you abandoned me for Ivy, I was in a car accident. I have amnesia. I've forgotten everything about you." Ethan couldn't believe it. Besides those 7 years, he had nothing left to tie her to him. "Didn't you always hate me following you around? Isn't this better? I've forgotten you. You don't have to be annoyed anymore." "No, Lily, I didn't. I do like you," Ethan explained frantically. Seeing that Lillian had said her piece, Samuel shoved the still reeling Ethan aside. "Ethan Crawford, Lily has made herself clear. Please don't harass my girlfriend again, or next time I'm calling the police." With that, Samuel closed the door, shutting the desolate, stunned Ethan outside. Chapter 21, Ethan slumped against the wall by the door and sat there for a long time before finally getting up. He spoke softly to the closed door. "Lily, if I can bring back your memories, will you come back to me?" He was convinced that if Lillian remembered everything, she would choose him. After all, she had chased him for 7 years. It was impossible for her to let go of that overnight. Ethan returned to Capital City and searched his house for anything related to Lillian, hoping to use it to restore her memory. But after turning the house upside down, the only thing he found was a small scented sachet she had made for him, tucked away in a box in a storage room. Nothing else. He asked the housekeeper, "What happened to all the things Lillian gave me that were in the storage room?" "Sir, didn't you tell us to throw them all away?" the housekeeper replied. Hearing this, Ethan waved his hand in frustration and continued his search, hoping to find some other trace of their shared past. Clutching the few items he managed to find, Ethan rushed back to Bayview. He waited downstairs at Lillian's building for an entire day before he finally saw her come down with Samuel. Ignoring Samuel's presence, Ethan held out the items to Lillian. "Lily, do you remember this sachet?" "You said." Lillian knocked the items out of his hand, and they fell to the ground. "Ethan Crawford, do you really think you can win me back with this junk?" "I've told you clearly, I don't remember. We should never see each other again." "Stop harassing me." Seeing her so resolute, Ethan reached out to grab her hand to stop her from leaving. Samuel, standing beside her, immediately blocked his path. Enraged, Ethan threw a punch at Samuel's face. Samuel, not one to back down, punched him right back. The two of them began to fight. Lillian quickly wrapped her arms around Samuel's waist and pulled him away. "Samuel, stop fighting, your lip is bleeding." Samuel wiped the blood from his mouth and spat at the disheveled Ethan. "If you ever bother Lily again, I'll beat you up every time I see you." Lillian took Samuel's hand and gently touched his face, examining the cut. "It's broken the skin. Let's go put something on it." Seeing their intimacy, Ethan felt a sharp pain in his chest. "Lily," Lillian heard him call her name but didn't look back. She just led Samuel towards the building. Ethan wanted to follow, but his feet felt like they were weighted down with lead. He could only stand there, watching them walk away. He remembered a time in college when he had gotten into a fight over Ivy. Lillian had stood in front of him, dotingly tending to his wounds, but he had found her annoying and pushed her away. Everything Samuel had now, he once had too. He had trampled on Lillian's heart. He had personally pushed the girl whose world revolved around him into another man's arms. Ethan stood there, dejected, not moving even as night fell. "Ethan?" He heard someone call his name and thought it was Lillian. He looked up eagerly, only to see Ivy, his face filled with disgust. "What are you doing here?" Tears welled in Ivy's eyes as she looked at him pitifully. "Ethan, I know I was wrong. What I did before." She reached out to touch him. He dodged her hand and looked at her coldly. Chapter 22, when Ethan abruptly moved away, Ivy stumbled forward from the momentum, nearly falling to the ground. She looked at him pleadingly. "Ethan, I really know I was wrong. Didn't you used to love me the most?" Her words only made him angrier. "You have the nerve to bring up the past. I was so good to you, and you used me time and time again." Seeing that her act was getting her nowhere, Ivy dropped the pretense. "You think I have no right to talk about the past? Then what right do you have to bring up the past with Lillian Hayes? How are you any better than me?" "You followed me," Ivy sneered. "I did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have witnessed such a spectacular scene." Having been repeatedly rejected by Lillian, and now being mocked by Ivy, Ethan snapped. He lunged forward and wrapped his hands around Ivy's neck. As his grip tightened, Ivy struggled to breathe, her face turning red. She couldn't break free, so she gave up and started to laugh, her voice strained. "What's the point of taking it out on me? You're the one who hurt Lillian over and over again, not me." Ivy's face went from red to white as she was about to pass out. Ethan let go, shoving her aside. Ivy collapsed to the ground, clutching her neck and gasping for air. Ethan looked down at her, his voice cold. "I'm going to release the truth about everything you did, using my name." He felt it was the only way he might have a sliver of a chance to win Lillian back. Hearing this, Ivy panicked. She tried to scramble up from the ground, but her limbs were weak from the near-death experience. She could only crawl towards Ethan, grabbing his pant leg. "You can't, Ethan. I was just talking nonsense. I was wrong." Ethan looked at the hand clutching his pants with disgust. Let go. Ivy knew that if the truth came out, she would be finished. She held on tighter, hoping he would have a change of heart. When she wouldn't let go, he kicked her hand away and strode off. Ivy lay on the ground, watching his retreating back, a crazed thought forming in her mind. Why does Lillian Hayes get the love of two men, while I get treated like this? Consumed by hatred, Ivy whispered to herself, if Lillian Hayes died, would Ethan come back to me? Afraid of Ethan's continued harassment, Lillian stayed home for 2 days. Samuel, worried she would get cabin fever, suggested they go out on a date. Lillian looked at the still healing cut on Samuel's lip and thought of the shameless Ethan, shaking her head. What if he shows up again? Samuel pulled Lillian into his arms and kissed her cheek. Don't worry, I'll protect you. After some hesitation, she agreed. Samuel took Lillian to a nearby shopping mall. As they were about to enter, they saw the ever-present Ethan. They turned to leave, but Ethan rushed over, trying to grab Lillian's arm. At that moment, a car suddenly sped out from the side, heading straight for Lillian. Chapter 23, the sight of the car hurtling towards her paralyzed Lillian, and she froze on the spot. Both Ethan and Samuel saw the car and, horrified, rushed to pull her out of the way. Lily, move. Samuel was closer. He grabbed Lillian and pulled her aside, but the car was moving too fast and it still hit them. Samuel shielded Lillian with his body as they were thrown to the side, tumbling to a stop. Lillian's head hit a nearby planter. Samuel, who had taken the brunt of the impact, had his leg struck by the car and his arm scraped up during the fall. Ignoring the pain in his leg and arm, Samuel immediately checked on Lillian. He saw that her head was bleeding and she was unconscious. He yelled to the onlookers, "Call an ambulance." Ethan ran over, wanting to check on Lillian, but Samuel, with what little strength he had left, pushed him away. He roared at Ethan, "You'd better see what Ivy Gardner has done." In that split-second moment, as Samuel held Lillian, he had seen that the driver was Ivy. Ethan looked towards the car and saw Ivy in the driver's seat. The car had crashed into another planter. The airbags had deployed, and smoke was rising from the engine. Ethan ran to the car and dragged Ivy out. Her head was also injured from the impact, and she was disoriented. But Ethan didn't care. He threw her to the ground. "How could you do something like this? If anything happens to Lily, I will make you pay." In the distance, the sirens of police cars and ambulances grew louder. When Lillian regained consciousness, she was in a hospital. She stared at the ceiling, disoriented, before trying to sit up. A nurse rushed over to stop her. Lillian grabbed the nurse's arm anxiously. "Samuel, how is he?" The nurse tried to calm her down. "The patient who was brought in with you is in the room next door." "How is he? Is he badly hurt?" Lillian was on the verge of tears, her voice cracking. "He's fine, just a fractured leg and some scrapes. His life is not in danger." The answer did little to calm her. She needed to see for herself that he was okay. Ignoring the nurse's protests, Lillian insisted on seeing Samuel. As they were at a standoff, the door opened. Samuel was wheeled in by another nurse. Seeing that he was all right, Lillian threw her arms around him and sobbed, "I'm so glad you're okay." Samuel stroked her hair, soothing her. "The doctor said you have a mild concussion and need to rest. You can't get too emotional." He helped her back into bed and then moved his wheelchair next to her. "Lily," the door was pushed open again. Ethan walked in, carrying supplements, his face etched with worry. Both Samuel and Lillian frowned at the sight of him. "Get out," Lillian yelled, pointing at the door. Ethan placed the items he was carrying on the bedside table and tried to explain. "I didn't know anything about what Ivy was planning. Lillian cut him off by grabbing the items and throwing them at him. Ethan stood there, not moving, letting them hit him. "Lily, if this will make you forgive me, then you can hit me as much as you want." Lillian let out a cold laugh. "Ethan Crawford, do you really think that by playing the victim, I'll forgive you? Do you think a few half-hearted apologies can erase the 7 years of pain you put me through?" Chapter 24, hearing Lillian mention the 7 years. Ethan stepped forward excitedly. "Lily, you remember." At his words, Samuel glanced worriedly at Lillian. He wasn't sure if the few months they had spent together could compare to the 7 years she had with Ethan. Lillian saw his concern and squeezed his hand before turning back to Ethan. "I remember. But Ethan Crawford, what makes you think I would ever go back? In all those 7 years, did you ever show me a single shred of kindness?" The things you brought to try and jog my memory were things I shamelessly gave to you. Do you have a single item that holds a memory of us?" Ethan was speechless, unable to answer her questions. Lillian continued, 7 years. "You were tired of it, and I was tired. I have someone I want to spend the rest of my life with now. Let me go." Her words were both a rejection and a plea. "I'm sorry." With those 2 words, Ethan left the room, almost as if he were fleeing. "Lily, the person you want to spend the rest of your life with, is it me?" Samuel's voice was a mix of hope and nervousness. Lillian tightened her grip on his hand and looked him steadily in the eyes. "Yes. Samuel Thorne, Lillian Hayes, want to spend the rest of my life with you." Meanwhile, just as Ethan stepped out of the room, Ivy grabbed him. Her hair was disheveled, her face pale. She was a shadow of her former self. She clutched his sleeve like it was her last lifeline. "Ethan, I can't go to jail. I can't." Ethan had already released the evidence of Ivy's plagiarism and her other misdeeds. The damage that had been done to Thorne Industries by the scandal was now rebounding onto Ivy and Crawford Corp. Ivy had been fired, she was being vilified online, and she was under investigation for the car crash. She was facing several years in prison. She couldn't accept this. Her only hope was to beg Ethan for help, to beg Lillian for a letter of forgiveness. Ethan pried her fingers off his sleeve, one by one. "No, Ethan, please, you have to help me." It was a moment of madness. "I didn't want to kill her, I really didn't." Ethan pushed her to the ground. "Save it for the police." His words shattered her last hope. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Lillian heard about Ivy's fate from Samuel. "Ethan Crawford came to see you a few days ago." The sudden mention of his name confused Lillian. Why bring him up? For a while now, their lives had been peaceful. It seemed Ethan had finally taken her words to heart and stopped harassing her. Since Lillian had regained her memory and confessed her love for him, Samuel had been completely at ease. He no longer felt the rivalry he once had with Ethan. "He came to tell you that he had investigated everything and that Ivy has been sent to prison." Samuel paused before continuing. "He said he trampled on your feelings for 7 years, and now it's his turn to chase you." Lillian was not moved by Ethan's words at all. She made a gagging motion at Samuel. They both burst out laughing. "Lillian, are you sure you don't love him anymore?" Lillian planted a kiss on Samuel's cheek. "I've answered that question many times. I'll answer it one last time. Lillian Hayes now and forever loves only Samuel Thorne." At her words, Samuel immediately dropped to one knee and pulled out a ring. "I know this is a bit rushed, but I can't wait any longer." "Lillian Hayes, will you marry me?" Lillian looked at Samuel. There was no cheering crowd, no elaborate setup, but she could hear her own heart pounding in her chest and a voice inside her screaming, "Say yes." "I will." Chapter 25. After returning from Bayview, Ethan Crawford fell into a deep depression. He locked himself in his house, drinking day and night. When Nina opened the door to his room, the stench of alcohol was so strong it made her step back. After a moment, she pinched her nose and walked in. Ethan was sitting on the floor, leaning against the sofa. He saw someone enter and a flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. When he saw it was just Nina, the light quickly faded. "Brother, you need to stop drinking." Nina snatched the bottle from his hand. He simply picked up another one and took a long swig. "What are you doing here?" Nina kicked his leg lightly. "To make sure you don't drink yourself to death." Despite her harsh words, she still cared for her brother. She went to the kitchen and made him a hangover soup. When she offered it to him, he didn't take it. Nina placed the bowl on the coffee table. "The recipe is from Lily." Hearing Lillian's name, Ethan's eyes finally showed some life. He picked up the bowl and took a sip. The familiar taste brought tears to his eyes. He drank the entire bowl, the salty taste of his tears mixing with the soup. "Can you please ask Lily for me? I was wrong, I was so wrong." He sobbed as he spoke. Nina had promised Lillian she wouldn't interfere in her relationship with Ethan again and was about to refuse. But seeing her brother pale, disheveled, and completely broken, she couldn't bring herself to say no. She sighed. "I'll see what her attitude is." Back at her own place, Nina was about to call Lillian when Lillian called her. "Lily, what's up?" "Nina, I'm getting married. I want you to be my maid of honor." Years ago, when Lillian was chasing Ethan, she had told Nina that she wanted her to be her maid of honor at their wedding. Now, even though the groom was someone else, Nina still remembered that promise. She was so shocked by the news that she was speechless for a moment. "Nina, Nina, Lillian's voice on the other end brought her back to reality. Of course, I'll be your maid of honor. Nina swallowed the words she had been about to say for Ethan. Although she tried to hide it, Lillian could hear the hesitation in her voice. Nina, is there something you want to tell me? Nina hesitated for a moment before asking. No, nothing. When's the wedding? She figured that if Lillian was getting married, she must have found someone she truly loved. Lillian had suffered so much because of her brother. Now that she had found happiness, Nina, as her best friend, should be happy for her. As for her brother, this was a lesson he had to learn for his own blindness. The next time Nina saw Ethan, he immediately asked, "What did Lily say?" "She's getting married." Nina watched as her brother, who had been sitting straight, seemed to crumple, as if all the life had been drained out of him. "Brother, Lily has moved on, you should too." Ethan didn't answer, just sat in silence. The day before Nina was due to leave for Bayview, Ethan found her and handed her a jewelry box. "I made this comb myself. Give it to her as a wedding gift." It was obvious who her was. "I'll give it to her. Don't just give it to her, don't tell her it's from me." Ethan paused. "If she knows it's from me, she won't accept it." Nina said nothing more and took the box. Before the ceremony began, Nina handed the jewelry box to Lillian. "A wedding gift for you. I wish you a lifetime of happiness." Lillian opened the box and saw a handmade sandalwood comb. She froze for a moment, then handed the box back. "Ethan asked you to give this to me, didn't he?" Nina was surprised she knew. Years ago, it was popular to make handmade gifts for the person you loved. Lillian had followed the trend and made Ethan a sachet, pestering him to accept it. She had never expected him to make her a comb, only hoped he might buy her one. To receive the gift she had once longed for under these circumstances felt almost laughable. "I'm married now. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to accept this. Please give it back to him." Nina sighed and took the comb back. With Nina's help, Lillian put on her wedding dress. Her father walked her down the aisle to Samuel. "Lily is in your hands now. You must always be good to her." Samuel took Lillian's hand, his own eyes misty. "I will." The ceremony proceeded without a hitch. The bride and groom will now exchange rings. As Samuel kissed Lillian, he glanced over and saw Ethan sitting in the farthest corner of the hall. Their eyes met. Samuel, holding Lillian's hand, gave a slight, knowing gesture in Ethan's direction. A bitter taste filled Ethan's mouth. He stood up and left the hall. People have to pay for their mistakes. He could no longer be the one to spend a lifetime with Lillian. "Samuel, were you waving at someone?" "It's nothing, just someone unimportant." Lillian put the thought out of her mind. She looked at the man before her, their fingers intertwined. Surrounded by family and friends, she kissed her true happiness.